Let's go back to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Is he still the Archbishop of Canterbury? Or what is that yesterday? Anyway, Justin Welby has resigned, the first Archbishop of Canterbury that anyone can remember having to resign in disgrace. It's thrown the Church of England, which is, after all, Britain's state religion, into absolute crisis. And I think there are a number of issues to discuss here. So who better to do it with than social commentator and author and professor, I believe now, Dr Rakib Ehsan. Hello, Rakib.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm all right. Well, first of all, just on a kind of facial basis, what do you make of Justin Welby's predicament? I mean, he seemed to want to hang on, to cling on to his job, even though he's basically admitted that he did know that this guy, John Smyth, who he's known, who's kind of been a friend since the 1970s, he knew he was up to no good. He'd had reports that this guy was a vicious and terrible paedophile who traumatised and tortured about 132 kids in about 3 different countries, particularly here in Britain. And he kept quiet. He didn't say anything. He said, oh, well, I thought someone told the police, but on reflection, you know, I should have been more energetic in the investigation. I mean, the impression so far, Rakib, is that this guy covered up for a mate of his, and that is not good.
No, and the reality is that this is a damning review. And this child sexual abuse didn't only take place in the UK, it also took place in Zimbabwe and South Africa as well. So while this is very much a domestic problem, our international reputation is also at stake because of this. And I think when you look at Justin Welby's tenure as the Archbishop of Canterbury, Kevin, I have to be honest, it's been truly disastrous. The focus should have been on the bread and butter of getting the Church of England's house in order. But all too often we've seen Justin Welby indulge in racial identity politics, intervene in matters of government policy relating to immigration and asylum. So I think that the Archbishop of Canterbury, I'm not even sure if he is the Archbishop of Canterbury now, but what's very clear is that Justin Welby has plunged the Church of England in a very serious crisis.
Yes, indeed. I think 3,000 churches closed during his regime, and of course congregations plummeted. And you know, I've spoken to several clerics, several C of E vicars, who agree that this man, with his wokery and his sort of fashionable London elite leftism, alienated his congregations, and therefore their numbers plummeted. Now, this is a guy, just to run through a few of his favourite policies, called the EU, the European Union, the greatest dream realised for human beings since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, linked Brexit to Trump and fascism, made comparisons of the Rwanda plan to the Nazis and called it ungodly, likened the climate threat to the Nazis, entered talks with MPs to chair a citizens' assembly, complained that the Brexit deal would create a disastrous precedent, you know, in 2020, and he also commissioned a kind of slavery review, which would have resulted in, you know, beautiful statues being hauled down in Canterbury Cathedral, etc., etc. Now, this is just fashionable left-wing wokery, prevalent in the cities, prevalent in London, but that, I think, left his congregations absolutely alienated.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I'd make the point that since the turn of the century, there's been a fundamental decline in Christian devotion overall. If you look at England and Wales in the 2001 census, over 7 in 10 people identified as Christian. In the most recent 2021 census, that dropped to under half. And I think that the Church of England has to take some responsibility for that, especially Justin Welby, who's sought to repackage Anglicanism in socially liberal terms in order to try and reinvigorate it. I never thought that that was a very wise strategy at all. But with this scandal of child sexual abuse, where it looks like there's been a grand institutional cover-up, that's actually done a great deal of damage to the Church of England. I'll tell you one thing that worries me, person of faith, and actually thinks that Britain's Christian traditions and heritage is something to be celebrated, it will inject energy into the disestablishment movement. And for me, that's actually quite concerning.
Yeah, now my friend and colleague, former co-host Alex Phillips, is a very devout Christian, regular churchgoer, and she's dismayed. She's just saying, well, look, as we, or as the church considers who will replace the dreadful Justin Welby, who I think has got some very serious questions to answer.
He does.
There's a danger here that this guy could have been complicit in this, and that means I'm afraid the old Bill might have to talk to him. He's not necessarily just going to get away with the resignation. It's an absolute catastrophe, this. But what Alex has pointed out is there are runners and riders already, in the stakes to replace Justin Welby. One is the lead for climate change in the Church of England. Another is a renowned expert on diversity and multiculturalism. One focuses on interfaith relations, and one was the Church's COVID guru when, of course, they closed all the doors, when the House of God wasn't available to...
when many people needed it the most at that time.
Exactly right. Therefore, it looks as if the Church may be shaping up to replace Justin Wokeby, as we called him, with Justin Wokeby Mark II. They're not really learning from this, are they? What Alex wants, and I think a lot of other COV churchgoers, the remaining few, is a return to what the Church is about, worshipping God.
No, absolutely. I would have thought a wholesome message based on faith, family and community would do the trick. I think that's the most effective way to reinvigorate Anglicanism. And I think that this is the problem, is that there is the prominent figures within the Church of England who believe that reinvigoration is best achieved by subscribing to socially liberal values. Not just socially liberal values, but fashionable cultural trends, many of them being imported from the United States. I don't think that's going to work in the slightest. So we've talked about some of the replacements, the possible replacements. I think that if there's someone there, essentially if it's Justin Welby Mark II, I think that that's going to be a very serious problem for the Church of England. And I think that that's going to achieve very little in terms of reinvigorating the size of congregations across the country. I think it's highly unlikely.
And I think co-opting religion and Welby's alleged belief in God, to promote his own political beliefs is actually pretty damn disgraceful. To call the Rwanda scheme ungodly, that is not...
It's an overreach.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I'd say so. And I think that there's other things that I think that the Church of England should be talking about. For example, modern Britain is an international hotspot when it comes to family breakdown, which there's a chance there for the Church of England to talk about the importance of family values, intergenerational connection, the importance of the elderly in terms of being a source of wisdom and knowledge. And that there has been, I think, in mainstream Britain, with the rise of individualism and materialism, I think there has been a loss of community spirit. And I think that the Church of England can provide a wholesome message based on faith, family and community. What I don't want to see it is indulging in radical cultural liberalism and ultra-progressivism, because I think that will actually do more harm than good when it comes to the Church of England's overall credibility.
I was saying to a vicar, a cleric that I had on my show last night, that I'm old enough to remember when the Church of England was known as the Tory party at prayer.
At prayer.
And now Welby has steered it a long way away from that, but probably far too far. And frankly, I don't think churches should be about politics. They should be about the worship of God, the belief in Jesus Christ, if you're a Christian, and so on and so forth. And, just try, if you can, Rakib, to express why it is you feel that Welby was so deaf to this obvious course of action that he should have taken. You know, it's the church. Worship God. Worship Jesus Christ. Don't go on about Rwanda being ungodly. Why couldn't he realise this?
Oh, I think that it's a case of institutional capture. I think many of our traditional institutions, which are a fundamental part of British heritage, they've been captured by this progressive ideology. And I think that, as you talked about there, dwindling congregations, which is not necessarily the case. Not necessarily the case in my hometown of Luton, where you have quite socially conservative migrants from West Africa and parts of Europe who very much they provide a very robust defence of conventional Christian teachings. But I think that ultra progressivism there's been an attempt to make Christianity look fashionable. But for me, I think that conventional Christian teachings can certainly do the job. And I think that in an era where there's increasing levels of loneliness, where there's a craving for feelings of security, neighborliness, and belonging, I actually think returning to those traditional Christian teachings could do a great deal of good in modern Britain.
A last question, really, Rakib, but, you know, we've seen these problems, child sex abuse, you know, in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is doing its best to get to grips with it, but it still has this tendency to cover up for its priests, its nefarious priests. It's extraordinary, isn't it, that a man like Justin Welby couldn't see that to, you know, turn a blind eye to what this guy John Smyth was doing. You know, well, I mean, if the full story that we've been told so far, and don't forget, Welby has admitted he feels shame about what he did, that he should have gone to the police. I mean, keeping quiet, turning a blind eye to what that man Smyth was up to, and I'm not going to go into what you know. Basically, he used to like to make children. He used to torture them so much that they bled, and that's what he liked to do. So knowing all of that, and basically letting it ride, as the Marrick report concluded, that had Justin Welby have told the police this man's horrible activities could have been curtailed much earlier. Instead, I think it was 2019, he died never having been brought to justice at age 75. I think if that is all the case, and it does seem to be, what Welby did is, I'm afraid it's wicked. It's wicked.
It is. I'd say sinister. In my view, and I think in general there's far too many religious figures, and I think that this spans a variety of religions, to be honest, Kevin, where you have figures who exploit their position of power and authority. They're in positions where young boys from traditional religious families, they naturally trust them. And they exploit that trust in the cruelest and most abusive of ways. They really do. And I think the main issue here, though, is that you have people in positions of leadership. They look to cover up these kind of scandals because they want to protect the reputation of those organizations and institutions. But what they don't realize is that if all of this is revealed further down the road, then that can cause fundamental damage, which may even be irreversible. And I think that's the point to make here.
Yeah, I've heard so many commentators say, oh, well, you know, he's made a terrible mistake here, but he's fundamentally a good man. Well, I'm not convinced.
No, I disagree.
I'm not convinced at all. And a lot of clerics are making it clear, and I think we can take this as read. This is the tip of the iceberg. The Church of England, a lot of other bishops who may have been complicit being called upon to resign. We've only just started this story, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Great to talk to you again, Rakib.